Hello, everybody, and this is Stacey from The Advisor, and I'm so excited because we have our very special guest today. She is a life coach and an author, and she's also on our podcast community. She has her own show on our channel, so I want you to go check her out. And her name is Chris Janssen, and she is an amazing person. And today she wants to talk about perfectionism, and that's something that a lot of people suffer with. And I think at all times in life, we get to those moments where we want everything perfect, but as you know, not that word really doesn't exist in the dictionary. It's a made up word. So, but we all suffer from it. So, Chris, I want to just introduce you and tell everybody a little about yourself and what you do. And I want to hear about how to, deal with perfectionism because that is something that really, can really destroy you. And, because it affects all your emotions and your mental health as well.
Right. Hi, Stacey. Good to see you again. Thanks for having me. Um, yeah, so a little about myself. Like you said, I'm a coach and an author, and my latest book is launching February 18th. It's called Grace Yourself: How to Show Up for the Sober Life You Want. The first one, I'm going to show both because the subtitles are similar. Living All In: How to Show Up for the Life You Want. So they're full of my coaching tools, life coaching tools. The second one is called How to Show Up for the Sober Life You Want, because it in order to talk about some of these tools, I share my story of sobriety. I entered recovery in 2007, so I've been sober for some time now. I had a one relapse in there, and so I share that story. And really, I love talking about perfectionism, and it's a key of the book because it had a lot to do with why I was unable to get sober before I found a sober community. And then I had almost forgotten that I used, because I'd been sober 14 years when
Yeah.
I went back out. And so I almost forgot I used to struggle so much with perfectionism. So
Yeah.
as soon as I introduced alcohol back into my life, thinking I could pull it off this time,
Yeah.
um, even though I knew right away I couldn't, the first thing that really popped up was that reared its ugly head was that perfectionism, and which led to shame and, oh my gosh, I can't believe I did this. And so I came up with some great tools, and that's, a big theme of the book is how do we deal with that? How do we deal with performance pressure, perfectionism, the difference between perfectionism and being a high achiever or a growth oriented person, which I
Yeah.
am, and self-sabotage and how to navigate that.
Right. I think a lot of times we all tend to self-sabotage ourselves. And for you, what did happen to you that you self-sabotaged yourself?
It was standards that were too high as a young person. And I think I get the question a lot, is it our environment or
Yeah.
something else? And I think it's different for everybody. I had a wonderful childhood. I also was a perfectionistic child. Everything had to be just right. Of course, young people, we don't know, we don't understand, right?
Right.
How to navigate that tension. And so, the self-sabotage came in the form of setting a standard that was impossible to meet,
Hmm.
and then making these, like, okay, I'm going to do this, but this is what I want, but in order to have that, this has to happen. Well,
Yeah.
that rule for how this had to happen was unattainable because it was outside of my control. So I
Right.
have a coaching, I can talk to you about the coaching tool I developed around that, but it was basic, I mean, in a nutshell, setting standards that are too high and making it impossible. You're making happiness
Yeah.
tragically difficult to achieve, and failure easy to achieve, right? Or
Right.
unhappiness easy to achieve by the standards we set and the rules we put on ourselves.
Now, how did you overcome perfectionism? Because that's very hard to do. Most people live their entire life with those high standards, and they just it's virtually impossible for them to break, and they end up stressing themselves out and never feeling quite good about themselves because they can't reach these unattainable, non-realistic, standards. How were you able to overcome that?
I realize, and I'm big on mentorship, so I have mentors in my life that help me
Mhm.
realize this. But the first thing was to define the difference between a high achiever and a perfectionist. Like,
Yes.
it's okay to be growth. I mean, you and I are both high achievers. We're growth oriented. I love learning. I love high standards, right? I like
Yeah.
nice things. I like the quality living. I like to feel good. I like to be at my best health wise. Those are not harmful standards. They're healthy
Right.
standards. So realize the difference. What's harmful and what's healthy. And
Yeah.
and then, I think an achiever will do what it takes to meet their goals. Or perfectionists may say, well, if I can't meet this goal, it's trash, and kind of self-sabotage, right?
Right.
Where an achiever will solve the problem, take a deep breath, tweak the tactics, try something different. So when
Yeah.
I'm working with clients, since a lot of them are high achievers that veer into the high stand, like rigid thinking perfectionism,
Yeah.
we're constantly working on, let's really focus on that crystal clear outcome, and then we work on the strategy to get the outcome.
Right.
And without a coach, or without kind of knowing this, and this is what I used to do, if we're not getting that outcome,
Yeah.
we might tend to think it's trash, ditch the outcome. No,
Right.
we don't want to ditch the outcome. We just want to tweak the strategy. And
Yes.
so like successful people do many, 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 many things that don't work on the way to getting their goal, right?
Yeah.
But we see that part. So that's what a lot of coaches, as coaches, we work with people on that. So that me and my clients don't self-sabotage. We keep
Right.
stay true to the outcome and tweak the tactics.
I love that. I love that.
Mhm.
Now, where like what are some of the things that you had to start changing in your life in order to overcome perfectionism? Like you talked about some of the things you just did. Like, how did you begin? Because that's always a question I get, like, where do I start? And they just don't know where to begin. What would be your answer? Like, where do you think if someone wants to break that habit of being a perfectionist and just getting stressed because life is never meeting up to the standards that those expectations they put on themselves. What would be your answer like so to get to have them realize that perfectionism is just unrealistic and you need to start breaking these bad habits by changing your mindset and this is how you do it. What would be your answer?
Well, be in community, have a mentor. Whether it's a community or one mentor. I mean, if we're specifically talking about recovery, that is to me a must, that we have a recovery community and a mentor, or some people would say a sponsor.
Yeah.
That's going to be very important. If we're not talking about addiction and recovery, and we're just talking about, perfectionism around the holidays, trying to do it all and be it all and get it all
Yeah.
done,
Mm-hmm.
I would say, yeah, it's always helpful to have a mentor or a friend that can point these things out. That's what our friends and coaches do for us. They see the
Yeah.
things that our blind spots that we can't see. In addition to that, though, spend some time. Maybe it's the quiet time you have in the morning, or whatever time of day that you have some contemplative time, where in your journal, write down what is it you want. Like, let's use an example. Let's say somebody wants to provide a fabulous holiday dinner
Right.
for family or guests or loved ones, right?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
And so they're my client. They're gonna say to me, I want to do this fabulous dinner. I'll say, what does a fabulous dinner look like? And they may say, well, everybody's enjoying themselves and
Yeah.
laughing and having a fun time. Well, right there, we're gonna look at that and say, are you in control of other people's good time?
Yeah.
we can't control, there's some things we're not in control of.
That's
So
true.
the things we can't control, like if other people have a fun time, or if people feel included, or if even if we make a perfect dish or
Right.
whatever it is, there's things outside of our control. And those are the things that are important. That is where we get stuck, right? So
Yes.
we will take those, and I like people to write it down and then ask themselves, what has to happen for me to do X, pull
Yeah.
off a holiday party? Okay, is that realistic? Well, is that within my control? And
Hmm.
look at those things. And if it's not, now you've set a standard that cannot, you might meet it because we're achievers, so we might meet it.
Yeah.
But we really might not. And then that's when the spiraling happens. So we'll just tweak that to a more realistic rule for having the goal that we want,
Yeah.
making sure that it's within our control, right? Like if I say, um, if having a fun, successful holiday party means I enjoyed myself, I felt good, I enjoyed the company of others, now those things are within my control,
Right.
right? I went to the store on this day, and then I did my best to cook this dish, and I followed a recipe. Those are realistic things that are within my control. But when
Yes.
we start adding all that other stuff that has to do with other people and super high standards, we might be getting ourselves in hot water.
Right. Now, when, those things happen and we, other people in our life or let's say they're at our event, we have no control of their behavior and what they say and what they do. And if they do something and in your head, you want the day to go perfectly and all of a sudden, turmoil starts or a family issue starts. And you know how when it is sometimes when families get together or someone says something stupid or someone may have a little too much to drink or just not thinking and just talking to talk, And, instead of getting yourself worked up or upset, how do you suggest, especially now because the holidays are coming, how do you handle the anxiety or the stress that others can cause you because you wanted everything to go a certain way and sometimes others may kind of change things around and it doesn't go that way for you. Instead of getting worked up, how's some positive ways that people could do things differently so their anxiety doesn't go up or they don't get stressed out and handle it in a more productive way.
Yeah, well, you said it you said the way you think it should go, right? So that's an expectation.
Yes,
So be proactive before the people even beginning of, it's okay to do this beginning of every single day, actually, is, have some mantras or things that you say or go through. Mine is practice appreciation over expectation,
I like
right?
that.
And I have to redo that throughout the day, sometimes hour to hour. But so be proactive, get in a headspace where you're going to be on the day's agenda, not your own. That doesn't mean
Right.
don't make plans, but plans change,
Yes.
obviously. But when we're, especially at the holidays, when we want everything to be a certain way, then we're just, holding on to these expectations. And unmet expectations can really lead to anger and
Yeah.
frustration, depression, anxiety. So we want to practice appreciation, not expectation. And I think for me, at least, that starts with, it's personal. It starts with myself, quiet time, proactively before the day even starts.
Yes.
And then there's all kinds of fun things we can do to remind ourselves of that. I love mantras. So I'll
Hmm.
make a mantra, right? Like appreciation over expectation, or, um, I'm a person of faith, so I'll pray every morning. Help me be on your agenda instead of my own. And that doesn't mean
Right.
I don't have an agenda. It's just that there might be an agenda for the day that trumps my agenda, right?
Right.
And so I can't I'm not saying I never get rattled about that. I do.
Yeah.
But that is something I work on. And so you can have little tricks like, we've all heard, like maybe it's something you keep in your pocket or some type of physical symbolic reminder of
Yeah.
that mantra or that mindset that you committed to, right? And
Right.
I have a part in this new book coming out that's about sobriety, that I talk about commitment over craving, and I'm
Yeah.
talking about it specifically with alcohol. It works with other things. So if I've committed to practice appreciation over expectation, well, what happens when a person's really pushing all my buttons and I'm
Yeah.
emotional, right? And
Yeah.
so we're going to have, maybe it's a rubber band on your wrist that you snap or whatever it is to take you back to that moment when you committed to practice this thing, to
Yeah.
practice being on the agenda for the day.
Right.
Um, because those thoughts, it's really good for me and for other people to remember that thoughts are just thoughts. we're
Yeah.
not we're not bad for having a thought. We're not bad because Aunt Sue frustrates us to the
Right.
end, right? We're not, it's just a thought. What we want to not act on it in a way
Yeah.
that we'll regret, right? So some people, though, especially if they're struggling with perfectionism, will get upset the moment they have the thought because they'll think, oh, I
Yeah.
committed to not doing this, get very frustrated. And then the downward spiral goes, if you have a thought, it's okay. It's just a
Right.
thought. It's just an action signal. It can't hurt you. Just zip it and reframe the thought the
Yeah.
best.
I think that's great. I think that's great. Now, with your book, what motivated you to want to write the book?
The book coming out, what motivated me is I wrote the first book. There was one chapter on patterns and addictions, and I just briefly shared a little bit that I about my sobriety.
Yeah.
And then I felt like that chapter needed a lot more, and so I wrote a whole book about it. So I went through um and and in the same tone of coaching with interactive tools, kind of like the commitment versus craving, things like that. Um, I want to write it because to me, we can't therapy or coach our way out of addiction.
Yeah.
We need community.
Hmm.
Can't do it alone.
Right.
And the best we can do is share our stories. And
Yeah.
so I'm just sharing my story. And I really like when I announced that I had this new book out, there's a lot of people that know me really well that didn't even know I was sober.
Right.
They probably know I didn't drink, but they didn't know why. And
Yeah.
um, so I feel, I'm in my second half of life now, so it's a little easier to be vulnerable and share a story. I don't care as much as I probably would have when I was younger.
Right.
So, and I don't have an opinion about, I don't think other people need to be loud and proud about their addiction story. I do think that it needs to be shared with somebody though. And that's why sober communities are so great because we can
Yeah.
be anonymous, we can be within the group. But it's a personal choice if we want to tell our story publicly.
Right.
I
Right.
don't even know if I really wanted to. I just ended up writing, and
Mhm.
then I thought, well, I guess we're going to do this now. Yeah, so I think, and I say when I'm on in interviews, I'm not a sober coach. I'm not an addiction expert. That is not my niche for coaching. I just happen to have been in recovery for 18 years and I have a story. So I'm an expert at telling my story, which is what
Right.
I'm writing in the book.
I love it. I love it. And I think it's so good sometimes to share a story because I think sometimes people feel alone or they feel like nobody is really understanding what they're going through. And it's hard sometimes to open up to people, like even family members could be a little biased, or if you have people that you are friends with, you're afraid to open that part of your life up because you don't want to be judged or looked at differently. You don't want them to think of you as any different. You are the person you are, and that sometimes because the world is so stigmatized, people fear opening up certain vulnerable parts of their lives. So I think it's great that you wrote the story because I think it will help people. I think, just even talking about perfectionism or talking about, addiction, these are topics that affect people's lives on a daily basis and plays a big role, and it's hard sometimes, when you're going through stressful times, people sometimes get vulnerable and they just want to, want something to just take the edge off. And that's when you need that community or that mentor, you know,
That's
the most. So I think it's like you said, it's an excellent choice to have a community or a mentor. And I like the idea of having a community because you can go to different people and talk to, or you have a group of people, but they all come from different walks of lives and they all look at things differently. So sometimes, what one person says might resonate and what another person says may not resonate as much. But when you have so many different people from different walks of life, they think differently, there's a connection somewhere, and that's what I loved about, when people do communities is that you have so much available to you from so many different people, but they all have one common goal and is to help each other. And that's the wonderful
right.
thing about it.
Yeah, that's right. And we have a saying in recovery groups, focus on the similarities, not the differences. And especially in recovery groups for addictions, you want to be in a group that's specific to your addiction.
Right.
I've experimented. I write this in the book too with, there was one recovery group I went to, and it was, we're going to get over habits and hangups and hurts. And that's wonderful. I mean, yes, obviously we need that. It's wonderful. It just didn't help me with alcohol addiction
Right.
because not everyone in there was addicted to alcohol. So
Yes.
the great thing about whatever somebody wants support with is to go there. We live in a world right now where we can go online and find a support group for just
Yes.
about anything. So
Yeah.
there's no excuse,
Yeah.
and you can find an anonymous one too. So if you want to be private, there's no excuse for that either. And so the wonderful thing about being in a group like that that's specific to your addiction is that we all, like you said, have a common goal. And we are all very different people from very different walks of life. And none of that matters because we share that common goal. Like immediately in the first, minute of meeting somebody new
Yeah.
in that group, you are bonded by that common goal. So
Yes.
I say in the book, for me, why I drank is not as important as why I don't want to. So when I'm looking for a group, I'm looking for people who share my same goal. I don't necessarily need a group of people who shares my past hurts.
Right.
I
Mhm.
want people going in the direction I'm going.
Yes.
For
I
me,
like
that's what works.
I think that's a great input. Like I think it's very important that you have that one common denominator and because you at the end of the day you want to find people that want the same thing, and when you have a group of people that are looking for the same thing, the end result, then you can relate better because you're on the same level, the same path. Your mindset is kind of like aligned with each other, so you'll have more in common. And I think you have to kind of like kind of ace your way through it. And I think people have to realize too, like if they go to maybe like you mentioned a group, it may not be the right group for them, but not to give up, because it's sometimes it might take two or three times or more until you find that right community that will be the perfect community for you.
That's exactly right. And please, if people are listening, don't use that as an excuse. Oh, it didn't work.
Yeah,
Recovery's not for me.
right.
Well, that goes back to what we talked about in the beginning about we tweak the tactics, we don't ditch the outcome.
Exactly.
That
Exactly.
would fall into well, that didn't work. So
Yes.
toss the whole idea in the trash. No. Okay.
Right. Exactly. Exactly. And it's so important to live life and to be healthy and to be able to, not go through life having to be codependent on something, and having to like not be able to cope with your own problems and having to run to a substance to be able to cope with it. It's such a rewarding feeling when you could be able to stop and handle something without having to use another coping mechanism, but you could do it to, with your own self, whether it be through any, strategies you learned or just talking to somebody and just getting the support you need. It's nice not to have to go back down that road because in the end all, it never a good road, eventually, everyone hits rock bottom. It's just everyone does it, at a different time, at a different place. And, but to be able to live life and to be able to, be 100% and enjoy life and not be under the influence or not, think that everything has to be perfect and just enjoy who you are and then just enjoy everything around you. It's such a rewarding feeling, and it takes time sometimes to get to that point where you don't care about being perfect and you don't have to run, to try to, find a way to cope, in an unhealthy way because you have the tools now and and I guess you finally fit your pair of shoes, it's, in that sense, and that I think that's such a rewarding feeling in itself also.
Yes, very well said.
Now, if you had to take today's conversation and you really wanted to pull out some important takeaways, what are some of the things that you'd like to emphasize on?
Keep the rules you have for getting what you want within your control.
Hmm.
And if uh, addiction is part of the outcome or thing that you are moving towards, find a community, and it's okay to share stories. And we don't need to be, you do not have to be public, and you can be anonymous. There's no rule, there's no right or wrong sobriety group. People will say people will say this group doesn't work or this group,
Yeah,
recovery in itself is a win. And
right.
what if you're recovering from perfectionism? That's a win. Um, so there's different groups for everybody because we are all such different people. That's why we have so many different mentors and churches and workout facilities. I mean, we all can't be all at the same place, right?
Yeah. Hmm.
So, like you said, if one isn't on your frequency, try another one. Don't ditch the outcome, tweak the tactics.
Exactly. Exactly. That's very well said. Now tell everybody about your services that you provide.
Oh, in addition to an author, I'm a coach. I'm a life coach. I have a master's in counseling psychology. And then when coaching came on the scene, I went back to school and got my coaching certificate. So I'm a results coach, life coach. People can go to my website, chrisjansencoaching.com, and schedule a 15-minute get to know you to see if we are a fit to work together. I put my prices right on the website, so you know. But yeah, I work with people all over the world, and I do phone coaching one-on-one. So, yeah. And I'm also be in prep for this book launch. I'm also available to do workshops for groups or come talk to your group. And that is all on my website as well.
I love it. I love it. And can you show everybody your book one more time before we go?
They did such a good job on the cover. I
I
love it.
love the cover. I really do. I love how that came out. That looks
Yeah,
beautiful. I love it. And your book will be out February 18th,
that's
correct?
right. And it's available now for pre-order. I'm trying to pitch as many pre-orders as humanly possible because it's with a book like this, it really is about the impact and how many people we can
Yeah.
serve. And so the spread of the book, the way the literary world works is pre-orders mean the world to authors. Those
Yes.
pre-order numbers on launch week. So if somebody's thinking about getting the book, I would so appreciate it if they just You can get it where books are sold. It's on Amazon. It's also Barnes and Noble, Target, all kinds of places. That's all on my website. But you can also get it directly from me at graceyourselfbook.com. And
Wonderful.
yeah, and then they could read about there's bulk packages too if a group wanted to buy more than one book and get a workshop included. I wrote a workbook.
Oh, no.
So you could use it for the book club. And there's even on that website, I can do a virtual facilitating your book club. There's all kinds of fun bonuses that are just between now and February 18th.
I love it. I love it. Oh my goodness. Well, this has been amazing. Thank you so much, Chris, for coming on the show. I really love, the idea of talking about perfectionism and then mentioning also about addiction too. And these are two topics that are, people struggle with all the time. So I'm really glad you brought them up and gave such great advice on how to overcome, these two things. And I really thank you so much for taking the time and even writing the book. I think it's great that you're sharing your story and, you'll definitely help somebody out there, and, it's amazing, but the words of wisdom is so powerful and, so many people read books and, it just, just knowing that there's somebody else out there similar to them and then they look and they see how someone else that did things, to help themselves, and if they could apply some of those tools to their life and improve their life, what a difference, you could be saving a life. So kudos to you. And I thank you for everything that you've done so far. And I thank you for being on our show today.
Oh, thank you for having me, Stacey. It's always fun talking to you.
Same here. And you have a great day.
You too.